It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Hey, yesterday I had Wes McCarter from Next Era on. We were talking about the numbers and the print volumes. And remember the conversation we had? We got into the production print. We were talking about some black and white production print equipment. Wes said he had 7,000 devices in his database, and 3,500 of those devices were running less than 50,000 pages a month. Folks, didn't that shake you up a little bit? Didn't that make you start thinking about your own production in your own marketplace? Well, today I'm going to talk about production. I'm going to talk about why it's probably the stupidest thing a dealer could ever get into. Boy, I can't believe Ray's telling us not to sell production. Folks, I've been telling you not to sell production for a long time, at least a half a decade pretty strongly. And I gave you the reasons why. But today I thought I'd reshare those reasons because obviously we're in a crisis. We're in a crisis around production black and white toner from some OEMs. And there's customers out there putting a lot of pressure on dealers because they can't deliver supplies to the production equipment. And then the dealer's looking at the production equipment in his base and realizes it's 1 or 2% of his population. Why is he having all these problems? Why does he have to manage all this nonsense over 1 or 2% of his business? So the dealers are starting to get aware. Maybe there's a better way. And today I'm going to share with those dealers what I believe could be a better way. It could be a way out of production. So you can focus on doing things that actually make you some money. So without any further ado, I want to get on my Sharp Interactive board. And, you know, folks, it was back in 2018, March 29th of 2018. I put an article out there. It was published in E&X Magazine. The title of the article was Production Industrial Print Equipment. Why? I was asking the question, why get into it? And then I analyzed 5,700 black and white production machines that were in the Next Era database. And it was disturbing what I saw. It was disturbing, folks. The article's out there. I strongly suggest you all go read it. I don't want to redo the article on this video today. But the bottom line is, our industry is dabbling in production print. And it's costing them more money than what they're making when they put it out in the marketplace. The math's in the article, and I don't believe that math's changed over the last 40 months. I just don't believe it's changed. I think it probably got worse. And ladies and gentlemen, the bottom line is we got to make a decision in our business. All those A3s that are littering the hallways of our customers' offices we all know they're going to go to A4, right? We all know that the customer's aware for the first time in the industry's history that they don't need the equipment as near as much as you might think they do. And changes are going to be had. Newcomers are going to come in. I talked about the right to repair earlier this week. Folks, there's so many things that are coming to disrupt the status quo of print equipment in people's offices. I wish you all would pay attention to some of this stuff. You got to quit hanging around these clubs where everybody gets along and sings Kumbaya and they don't challenge each other. Or they talk about things that they're never going to do. And we got to start focusing on what can we do right now to put money in our coffers. You know, on the end of the day with Ray, I've shared numbers. I've had my friend Milton Bartley of ImageQuest LLC on a few times. He shares his numbers. He's excited about what he's doing. Why is it we hear all this nonsense from dealers out there? How successful they are in production print is a great example. But they don't ever share their numbers. You know? I don't even know if they know their numbers. They think they're successful in production print because they sold a bunch of machines. In all reality, the machines they sold are running 50,000 pages a month and they're in there at 0.0035. Don't you think that's a problem? I do. Ladies and gentlemen, we know there's a toner shortage and that's a crisis, but I want to ask some other questions around this crisis. What's the real issue? An uncontrollable disaster, an accident, that could be an issue. Massive backlog at ports, that could be an issue. A global pandemic, that could be an issue. No foresight to modify status quo inventory levels, that's an issue. Folks, we knew that the ports were going to be clogged up back last June, July. Did we beef up our inventories then? Did we still think we could order as we go on production? Just asking the question. No real understanding of actual cost. To me, that's the biggest issue in production print today and the problems we're having with production print today. There's no understanding of the actual cost. And I know a lot of you are going to say, oh, no, we looked at eAutomate, it shows we're profitable. Well, it really just depends how you input information in eAutomate. It tells you if you're getting the right information out of eAutomate. The problem is, you can manipulate calls, you can do all kinds of things to change the cost, the real cost. When I did that analysis back for E&X Magazine, I talked about first call effectiveness. It was horrible. Biggest machines in the marketplace, first call effectiveness was horrible. It's like in the 30-something percentile. Now, I know you probably got consultants out there telling you, hey, go out and do some customer service calls and call them a service call, and by gosh, you'll increase your first call effectiveness. But when the serial number calls up and says, I'm sick, and you run out there, do you fix it or not? That's the only determination of first call effectiveness. The serial number calls you up, says, I'm sick. You go out there and you make it better that first call. You have the right part, you have the right mindset, you have the right tools, and you fix the customer. We don't do that in production print. And those of you that run around saying you got 80 or 90% first call effectiveness in production, I demand that you look at your numbers and you make sure you're analyzing it the correct way. Folks, I'm excited about this production thing because it's a problem. It's a big problem. And now's the time to address it like never before. Do you remember a while back, I did that video and I was talking about the rental car industry? And I told my friends in the Document Image channel, don't become the rental car industry. Don't get disrupted like they did. Y'all remember that video? I'm going to share a portion of it with you today. What I was talking about, if you look at the rental car industry, you know, they were doing great, right? Until what happened? Until the rideshare business model came into town. And then what happened? The majority of the rental car customers decided they liked the rideshare experience better. Who were the majority of the rental car industry's customers? Business travelers. That was the majority of their customers, the business traveler. And once the business traveler decided that the rideshare experience was a much better experience and pivoted over to the rideshare, guess what happened? The rental car business went to hell because they couldn't live off the fringes. There wasn't enough people getting in accidents and renting cars. They needed that business traveler. There wasn't enough families renting the SUV to go down to Texas to grandma's for Christmas. They needed that business traveler. Then I look at my friends in the Document Imaging channel. They got all these A3 machines littering hallways all across the world. They were oversold and overspec'd when they went in there. And now the customer has an awareness they don't need the equipment. They don't need it near as much as they thought. And they don't need it even close to what the resellers think they need. And so this awareness is going to change the buying behaviors of all those customers. And they're going to look for a better experience around business print. And when they look for a better experience around business print, the Document Imaging channel is going to lose a majority of their customers to the better experience. And when that happens, they're not going to be able to live off the fringes just like the rental car industry couldn't live off the fringes. They're not going to be able to live off this production print out there that they're losing money on, that they got a 35 or 37% first call effectiveness on. They suck at it anyway. And so, ladies and gentlemen, what's going to happen? It's going to be a disaster. So I have a solution. There's got to be a solution, right? So here's what I'm going to suggest, my friends. I'm going to just suggest this. If you're not mature enough in your deliverable of production print, and you don't have a clearly defined business model and how you're going to market and how you're monetizing it and how you're making money off what you monetize, then I suggest you call the dealer down the street who's better at it than you. And you tell that dealer down the street, hey, I want to exit out of production print and I want to sell it off to you. Folks, here's the reality of it. We got to start thinking out of the box, okay? We got to start thinking and positioning our organizations to do things that we can do well. We got to start positioning our organizations to be able to do more services business. But we also have to realize what we don't do well and get out of it. We got to start shedding ourselves of things that we don't do well. We got to start shedding ourselves of customers that cost us more money than we make from them. We got to start facing the realities in the marketplace. So think about this. Think about the dealer out there that's maybe a $5, $7, $8 million dealer. Maybe they have 10, 15, or 20 machines in the field that we would classify as production. And at the end of the day, if they did the math on them, they realize the average volume out there is maybe 150,000. They got a whole bunch of them running 50. They start realizing what it costs them to service that equipment because they're analyzing numbers correctly. They realize their first call effectiveness is killing them. They realize it's bogging down the service department having this equipment out there in the first place. They realize now that there's a toner crisis on a lot of production. Customers are really upset with them. So there's a lot of things everybody's realizing. So why don't we do something with what we realize? Call that dealer down the street. Here's some little math I did for you, folks. You could probably sell your production base for last year's revenue. I'm not too sure that somebody wouldn't do that. You know, because you know what? That business down the street that's more mature at production print will realize, well, if I take it over, I give the guy the money or the gal the money, and I give them that year's worth of revenue, I'll make it back. I'll be able to upgrade the equipment. I'll have control of the customer. you know? And if they're really mature at it, they'll realize that they could probably exit some of that equipment out of those customers' offices and change the game a little bit for them. Folks, it's a hard conversation to have, but you got to do something. You can't just keep losing money. You can't allow your customers to have terrible experiences. Do you realize if someone did give you revenue for what your production print was giving you, that if you were running a 20% EBITDA on that, which I assure you none of you are, and if you did the math on just your production print, you'd probably be in there with about a 5% if you're lucky, maybe 10. But if you had a 20 and you got 5 times, that would be the revenue number. So if I told you, hey, you could sell your production print for 5 times EBITDA, provided you had a 20% EBITDA, that'd be a great deal. You all be out there doing it, right? Maybe you should think about it. Maybe you should start having those conversations. Look, I don't know where these conversations are going to lead, but you're all smart men and women out there running these businesses. My concern is that we were able to dabble in certain things. We were able to live off the fringes of total disarray and mismanagement because we had this big base providing us all this revenue and all this money. And now that big base is really being pressured. And we know outsiders are going to come and put pressure on us to begin with. We know we got to pivot into other services. Do we really need to be dabbling in these outskirts, doing things that don't really make us any money, just so we can say we do them? Doing things that don't make us any real money so we can get an award from some OEM and hang it on our wall? Folks, there's a lot of tough decisions that are going to have to be made. A real lot of tough decisions that are going to have to be made. But we got to be able to start talking about some of this stuff, and we just can't do it. And until we can start talking about some of this dysfunction openly, candidly, and honestly, we're never going to fix anything. And just because we're not talking about it doesn't mean it's not out there. Just because we're not talking about all these dysfunctions doesn't mean that your competitors don't realize those dysfunctions. Because you know what innovators do? They look at what the old way is doing wrong, they create a better way, and they go take away a great relationship and deliver those customers a better experience. Folks, I know I went on a rant today around production because I'm begging y'all to look at your damn numbers. Look at your numbers on production. Put it on its own P&L. Build your own business model with it. And if you're not making any money, get rid of it. Shed it. And move on to other things. And don't get into something just because someone says get into it. Get into something because someone says you ought to get into it, and here's why, and here's how you're going to make money. Boy, wouldn't that be different? Ladies and gentlemen, a lot to think about today, but we all know this. Status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck in status quo, and I'll see y'all tomorrow.